Tonight, I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus.
Promises that the coronavirus will spread here.
As COVID-19 spreads around the globe,
throughout history, the world has experienced a variety of economic catastrophes, from the stock market crash of 1929 to the oil shortage of 1970s. We've seen bubble burst in everything, from real estate to internet startups to tulips. Economists, although not great at preventing a catastrophe, have a pretty good idea of how to respond to them. But something like the coronavirus creates a whole new set of problems. A recession is often the result of one of three types of shocks: a demand shock, a supply shock, or a financial shock. A demand shock is when consumers and businesses stop spending because they fear that the economy is going to get worse. I'm worried about the economy and losing my job, that I might not go buy a new car. Since the car company has less revenue, they don't invest in future projects, or maybe they lay off workers. These workers have less incomes, and so they spend less, leading to more unemployment. Is your textbook recession, and it's all caused from a lack of confidence. A supply shock is different. It was essential goods and services become more costly or unavailable. This is the oil crisis of 1970s, and in many ways, it's much worse. Inflation tends to rise and business lay off workers since they can't produce their products. The third type of shock involves the financial sector. A stock market crash or a failing bank. These prevent borrowing and lending, which leads to less spending and less production. The problem with COVID-19 or any pandemic is potentially it causes all three of these. Economists will tell you that there's two main ways to fight a recession. The first is the fiscal policy. That's when the government lowers taxes or increases spending, promote consumers and business spending. But if a country or a region is quarantined, tax cuts gonna help very much. Can't get out there, go spend the money. And the same thing applies to government spending. The government can't produce a bridge or buy things if there's nothing available to purchase. Recession caused by a global pandemic can't easily solve with the government just giving people money. So the second way to fight a recession is monetary policy. Federal Reserve and other central banks can lower interest rates, encourage more spending. Before starting, I must say that this new economic scenario that is coming affects anyone who has savings, since the Federal Reserve, which is the highest economic authority in the world, has just openly announced that it seeks to generate more inflation in the economy. Approximately 2 weeks ago, Jerome Powell, the president of the Federal Reserve and probably the person with the greatest economic power in the world, gave a speech that the media already describes as historic, since for the first time they have stated that they are looking for a higher level of inflation in the economy, and that interest rates are going to be low for many years. The new monetary policy of central banks will drastically change the economic scenario for the coming years, and the value of savings, deposits, real estate and stocks will be drastically affected. This kind of information is not usually published in public media, but we need to pay attention since the Federal Reserve and the central banks manage the economy mainly in the short and medium terms. For example, the day the Federal Reserve announced a $2 trillion liquidity injection on March 13th of this year marked the end of the bear market. Even though the economy has not recovered as Warren Buffett's indicator warns, the markets and stock exchanges are already at historic highs. It is nothing more than the rising prices, goods and services that we consume daily. First, the Federal Reserve wants to avoid deflation, which is nothing more than the continuous fall in the price of the goods and services we consume every day. This will be terrible for the economy and will slow it down at once, because it will increase its savings rates. But at the opposite pole, we have the monetary solution, or an environment of increasing prices. And because this creates an artificial wealth generation effect, since individuals earn more because wages are linked to inflation, or the value of the real estate and the stock market is increased. This makes them feel richer and go out to consume and not postpone their purchases. This ends up stimulating the economy. The second objective that the Federal Reserve seeks is to help governments or people who are highly indebted and to be able to repay their debts in a shorter period. However, the big losers are the savers. Obtain very long-term debt for 25 to 30 years at a fixed interest rate. While what we owe the bank will remain constant, the rate to attain end is affected by the effect of inflation. This makes the return extraordinary and generates higher profits in the future. Buy shares on the stock market that manufacture goods and services that are indispensable. Companies are quoted based on the profits they produce. So if profits double due to inflation, it is likely that their share price will also double. So we protect ourselves from inflation and even make a profit. Businesses of goods or essential services, like Microsoft. Good business that requires little reinvestment does not require large reinvestment like BMW or Tesla. With a little more risk and complying with the point number 1 and number 2, companies with assumable debt levels on their balance sheets. Invest in gold as it is finite money with high expectations of appreciation.